Skyrim is a land defined by mountains. Jagged peaks stretch across the province like the spine of some ancient beast. Snowstorms roll across frozen plains. Rivers carve their way through valleys that feel carved by history itself. Most players remember Skyrim for its forests, its ruins, and its towering cliffs. But there is another part of the province that almost nobody talks about: the ocean. Stretching along Skyrim's northern border lies the Sea of Ghosts, a vast and freezing expanse of water separating Skyrim from the distant continent of Atmora. It surrounds the northern coastlines of Winterhold, Dawnstar, and Solitude, and despite its size, most players barely interact with it at all. You can see it from the shore, you cross it during a few quests, but very rarely do you explore it. Because the moment you step too far into Skyrim's oceans, something becomes immediately clear. It feels empty, unnaturally empty, and the deeper you go, the more unsettling that emptiness becomes. Skyrim encourages exploration. Caves hide ancient artifacts. Mountains conceal forgotten shrines. Every valley seems to contain a story waiting to be discovered. But the ocean is different. When you begin swimming away from the shoreline, the environment quickly becomes quiet. The music fades, the sounds of civilization disappear. Soon there is nothing around you except water stretching in every direction. No ruins, no islands, no distant landmarks to guide you. Just the cold, grey horizon. It feels less like exploring a world and more like drifting beyond its boundaries. And in many ways, that's exactly what you're doing. Within the Elder Scrolls lore, one of Skyrim's oceans has a name that perfectly captures its atmosphere: the Sea of Ghosts. According to the history of Tamriel, this sea separates Skyrim from the frozen ruins of Atmora, the ancestral homeland of the Nords. Thousands of years ago, the first human settlers crossed this ocean to reach Tamriel. Since then, Atmora has become a frozen wasteland, locked in eternal winter. Which means the Sea of Ghosts isn't just cold, it's ancient. It's the water that carried entire civilizations across the world. But by the time of Skyrim's story, that history has faded. Trade routes are sparse, ships rarely travel north, and the ocean has become more of a boundary than a highway. A place people would rather avoid than explore. Part of what makes Skyrim's oceans so unsettling is something psychological. Humans naturally fear deep water. There's even a word for it: thalassophobia, the fear of vast, dark oceans. Games like Subnautica turn that fear into their entire design philosophy. The deeper you go, the more dangerous and alien the world becomes. But Skyrim takes the opposite approach. The deeper you go into its oceans, the less there is. No massive sea monsters, no underwater civilizations. Just an endless stretch of dark water and distant icebergs. And strangely enough, that absence can be even more unnerving, because when the ocean feels too empty, your mind begins filling in the blanks. Of course, Skyrim does technically have aquatic enemies, the slaughterfish. These small, aggressive fish attack players who swim too far from shore. But they're hardly terrifying. They're small, they're easy to kill, and most of the time, they're more annoying than threatening. Which creates an odd contrast. You're standing in the middle of an enormous freezing ocean, and the most dangerous creature you encounter is a fish the size of a dog. For a world filled with dragons, ancient demons, and undead enemies, Skyrim's oceans feel strangely underpopulated. And that emptiness only makes the environment feel more mysterious. Despite the ocean's emptiness, there are still a few hidden details beneath the surface. If you explore carefully along Skyrim's northern coastline, you can occasionally find sunken ships, lost cargo, and the skeletal remains of sailors who never reached shore. These small environmental stories hint at a much larger world beyond the player's view. Trade vessels crossing icy waters, storms strong enough to destroy entire ships, journeys that ended quietly beneath the waves. But these discoveries are rare, and between them lies miles of empty water, which means most players never really see them. As you travel further north along Skyrim's coastline, the ocean becomes increasingly dominated by ice. Massive floating glaciers drift through the Sea of Ghosts, jagged sheets of frozen water blocking navigational routes, and entire coastlines appear permanently frozen. These environments reinforce the sense that Skyrim exists on the edge of a truly hostile world. This is not a warm sea filled with thriving ecosystems. It's a freezing, unforgiving expanse where survival is uncertain. Even the water itself feels dangerous, cold enough to kill, wide enough to swallow ships whole. One of the few locations that truly uses Skyrim's ocean is Japhet's Folly. This isolated island appears during the quest Rise in the East. To reach it, players must travel across the Sea of Ghosts to confront a group of pirates threatening trade routes. For a brief moment, the ocean becomes central to the experience. Storms rage across the water, ships battle in the distance, and the island itself feels like a remote outpost far from civilization. But once the quest ends, most players never return. The ocean fades back into the background, a massive environment with surprisingly little reason to visit. Part of the reason Skyrim's oceans feel empty is purely technical. Skyrim was designed in 2011. Rendering a fully explorable underwater world would have required enormous resources. Instead, Bethesda focused its attention on land-based exploration. Mountains, cities, dungeons, ruins. The ocean became more of a visual boundary than an active part of the world. And while this decision made sense from a developmental standpoint, it also created one of the strangest environments in the entire game, a massive ocean with almost nothing in it. Despite its simplicity, Skyrim's ocean can still produce genuinely unsettling moments, especially when you travel far from shore. Imagine swimming north from Winterhold. The land slowly disappears behind you, the sky turns grey, icebergs drift silently across the water, and eventually, you realise something strange. You are completely alone, no NPCs, no ships, no land, just the distant horizon and the quiet sound of waves. In those moments, the ocean feels less like part of a map, and more like a void surrounding it. A reminder that Skyrim is just a small piece of a much larger world. If you swim far enough into Skyrim's oceans, you eventually reach the invisible boundaries of the game's world. You can't travel to Atmora, you can't sail to distant continents. The map simply ends. But the lore suggests that beyond that invisible barrier lies an enormous unexplored world. Frozen lands, lost civilizations, ancient histories buried beneath ice and snow. The Sea of Ghosts isn't just empty water. It's the border between what the game shows you and what it leaves to your imagination. Skyrim is remembered for its epic moments. Dragons circling above mountain peaks, battles between ancient warriors, journeys across frozen landscapes. But sometimes the most memorable experiences are the quiet ones. Standing on a northern shoreline, watching waves crash against icy cliffs, and staring out into a sea that stretches farther than the game allows you to travel. The Sea of Ghosts is vast, cold, and strangely empty. Yet that emptiness carries its own kind of atmosphere. It reminds you that Skyrim is only one corner of a much larger world. A world where entire continents lie beyond the horizon, waiting somewhere out there beyond the silent water at the edge of the map. Skyrim is a world that thrives on momentum. Cities clash over ancient thrones, guilds pull you into webs of political intrigue, and every crypt, cave, and corner seems to contain a secret just waiting to be uncovered. The land is teeming with activity, bursting with possibility, and yet nestled in the snow-covered hills west of Solitude stands a tower so overlooked, so unremarkable, that it feels like the world has simply passed by it. That place is Pinefrost Tower. To call Pinefrost Tower a location almost feels generous. It's not much more than a crumbling ruin sitting on a ridge staring blankly into the cold northern sky. Most players won't even know it exists. It's not marked on the map until you get really close. No one ever mentions it. No quest points you there. And once you arrive, there's no reward, no confrontation, no narrative breadcrumb to follow. There's just nothing. Some places in Skyrim are forgotten not because of their location, but because of their silence. Last time we explored a lonely outpost in the southeast, a beacon, Stendar's beacon, that stood vigil for a war that never came. This time we travel in the opposite direction, both geographically and spiritually, to another structure that's been abandoned not with fire or blood, but with indifference. When you first spot Pinefrost Tower, it seems to hint at significance. A tall stone structure, partially intact, sits like a lone sentinel over the snowy landscape. It has the air of something meaningful. Maybe a lookout post from the days of Skyrim's early history, a lost military outpost, a secret bandit den. Skyrim trains you to expect something, and so naturally you investigate. But when you reach the top, all you find is a dead bandit, a bedroll, and a chest with some randomized loot and some gold. That's it. No journals, no letters, no ghosts, no traps, no clever puzzles. In a game so dense with content, Pinefrost Tower feels like an absence. It gives you a named location and then offers absolutely nothing to justify the existence. Even the most inconsequential caves in Skyrim often have a bit of flair. A skeleton posed dramatically, a scrawled note, a bit of visual storytelling. But Pinefrost Tower has none of that. It is a place that dares to do nothing at all. Skyrim rarely leaves you alone. Even its silence usually comes with meaning. A barren tundra might lead you to a hunter's cabin. A still lake might conceal a sunken chest. But the tower is one of the only places where the silence is total. The game doesn't try to pull you deeper, it doesn't whisper a story in your ear, it just stands there. This is a place where the world stops speaking to you. There's no music cue, no ambient tension, just wind and snow and stone. You can almost imagine that Bethesda placed it there as kind of a forgotten placeholder, a landmark that was going to matter and then didn't. A tower built for a quest that never got written. Or maybe it was never meant to matter. Maybe it was always supposed to be a place that simply exists. And in that way, it becomes strangely poetic. If Pinefrost Tower does have a story, it's one you have to invent yourself. Why was the tower built? Who lived here? Was it ever manned by soldiers? Or was it always just another waypoint in Skyrim's vast, uncaring wilderness? There's a strange kind of sadness to it. The dead bandit at the top wasn't killed in some epic battle. There was no scorch marks, no arrows, no drama. It looks like they just stopped living one day. Their body, like the tower, is a remnant without a reason. You could imagine them as a fugitive hiding from the law, taking shelter in the ruins only to succumb to the cold or starvation. Maybe they were trying to start a new life out there, away from the chaos of the world. Maybe they were just passing through, but Skyrim evidently gives you nothing. No prompt, no text, no closure. And in doing so, it opens a vacuum your imagination can fill, but only if you choose to, because the game itself does not really care. There's something powerful about a place like Pinefrost Tower. In a game that constantly rewards you with XP, gold, dialogue decisions, Pinefrost Tower offers only a bit of that. It is content without consequence, a landmark without law. And in that sense, it almost feels subversive. Modern games, especially open-world RPGs, are obsessed with making every corner of the map matter. Developers cramming collectibles, quest hooks, Easter eggs, and side stories to make every step feel productive. But here, Pinefrost Tower quietly resists that philosophy. It is one of the few places in Skyrim that trust the player to be okay with not being rewarded. It dares to offer an experience that's purely atmospheric. You reach the summit, look out over the snow-covered peaks, hear the wind howl, and that's it. No fanfare, no deeper meaning, just a moment of stillness in a game obsessed with movement. The only real sense that makes it feel like a place in Skyrim is the 2-leveled frost trolls or ice wraiths that greet you. But even then, that all feels irrelevant. Unlike Skyrim's grand ruins, ancient Nord barrows and Dwemer cities frozen in time, Pinefrost Tower is a modern relic. It doesn't belong to some mythical civilization, it's not tied to the gods or the dragons. It's just a ruin. And that makes it feel weirdly grounded. This is not a ruin of legend, this is a ruin of circumstance. It could have been a military outpost, a bandit lookout, a hunter's retreat. And like so many forgotten places in our own world, it simply fell out of use. Now it decays, ignored, and unimportant. Its stone walls aren't lined with glowing crystals, its secrets are not protected by puzzles. There are no ghosts here, only echoes. This place never changes. No quest sends you back here, no character ever mentions it. It isn't updated or reused in DLC, and once you visit it, it remains exactly as you left it. And that makes it one of the rarest things in all of Skyrim, a place that exists entirely outside the story. You cannot affect it, and it does not affect you. That kind of narrative isolation is rare in games, and even rarer in Skyrim. Almost every other location in the game is connected to something bigger, but Pinefrost Tower feels like a place that exists purely for itself. It doesn't care whether you're the Dragonborn, or a wandering thief, or a lost alchemist. You are irrelevant here, and in that irrelevance, there is some kind of freedom. What Pinefrost Tower truly reveals is the strange luxury of a world that's too large to be entirely known. Skyrim is a curated experience, but it also allows for the possibility of places that fall through the cracks. Pinefrost isn't broken, bugged, or glitched. It's just there. It doesn't tie into any of the game's main systems, it doesn't complete a checklist. And that might be the most honest kind of realism Skyrim offers. Because in the real world, not every ruin has a plaque, not every corpse has a diary. Sometimes things are abandoned and no one remembers why. Sometimes a place just exists, quietly eroding under the snow and time. That's what this tower is, a digital ghost of intention. Maybe half built and half forgotten, it doesn't need you to be there. But the fact that you found it, the fact that you noticed its absence of meaning, makes it meaningful in a completely different way. Pinefrost Tower is a place in Skyrim where nothing happens. And in a world built on chaos, that makes it feel unforgettable. It is a monument to nothingness. A tower without a purpose, a ruin without a story, a location the game itself seems to have forgotten. And maybe that's why it matters. Because in a game where you are always the hero, always the center of the universe, this tower offers something rare. A moment of quiet, a place that asks for nothing of you. A reminder that not every story needs a conflict, and not every place needs a point. Sometimes the most powerful locations are the ones that let you feel small. Skyrim is a land of contrasts, icy wilderness and warm mead halls, ancient ruins and bustling cities, proud Nords and countless outsiders. But nowhere is this tension felt more keenly than in Windhelm, the oldest city in Skyrim and the home of the Stormcloak Rebellion. Windhelm is not simply a city, it is a symbol, making it one of the oldest human settlements in Tamriel. Its walls are ancient, its halls are heavy with history, yet for all its grandeur, Windhelm is not a city united by its legacy. Instead, it is a city defined by fracture. Its people are divided by race, its leadership is divided by war, and its streets are divided by crime. And even its architecture, old and crumbling, seems to speak of a city that is slowly falling apart under the weight of its own history. In every way that matters, Windhelm might be the most fractured town in all of Skyrim. To understand Windhelm's fractured state, one must begin with its history. The city was founded by the legendary Nord hero who led the first human settlers from Atmora. The very stones of Windhelm are said to have been laid in his time, making it a living relic of Skyrim's earliest days. This ancient legacy gives the city an air of importance, but also kind of a burden. Windhelm does not feel modern or adaptive. Its narrow streets, heavy stone and imposing architecture carry with them the weight of centuries. But this legacy also fractures the city's identity. On one hand, Windhelm stands as a proud symbol of Nord heritage and tradition. On the other, it feels like a fossil, a city stuck in the past, unable to evolve as the world changes. Its reverence for the old ways becomes both a source of pride and prison. In many ways, Windhelm is fractured between past and present, unable to reconcile its ancient identity with the realities of modern Skyrim. At the heart of Windhelm lies the throne room of Ulfric Stormcloak, the Jarl who leads the rebellion against the Empire. His seat of power transforms the city into the symbolic capital of Nord independence. But here too lies fracture. The Stormcloak rebellion divides not just Skyrim, but Windhelm itself. Supporters of Ulfric see him as a liberator, a man willing to fight for Skyrim's right to worship Talos and resist imperial oppression. His presence gives Windhelm a sense of purpose and political weight unmatched by most cities. Yet for others, Ulfric represents division and prejudice. His policies, particularly regarding non-Nords, cast a shadow over the city. The Empire views him as a traitor, while the people of Windhelm live in a constant state of tension, caught between loyalty to their Jarl and fear of what his rebellion might bring. The very air of Windhelm feels heavy with this division. To walk its streets is to feel a city bracing for war, fractured not just politically, but in spirit. Perhaps the most infamous fracture in Windhelm is found in the Grey Quarter, the section of the city where Dunmar immigrants are forced to live. After the eruption of Red Mountain devastated Morrowind, countless dark elves fled their homeland and settled in Skyrim. Many found refuge in Windhelm only to be shunted into a segregated district. Here they live in poverty, discrimination pressing down on them from all sides. The very name Grey Quarter speaks volumes. It is not even afforded a proper title, but rather a label that reduces its inhabitants to outsiders. The Dunmar here speak openly of the prejudice they endure, Nords refusing them jobs, landlords neglecting their homes, and guards harassing them. This fracture is not hidden, it is embedded into the very layout of the city. To explore Windhelm is to confront a literal division between races, a physical manifestation of the cultural fault lines that run through Skyrim. In the Grey Quarter, Windhelm reveals itself as a city unable to embrace its diversity, fractured deeply between Nords and the outsiders. Beyond politics and prejudice, Windhelm is also fractured by fear. The Blood on Ice quest reveals a darker side of the city, as the Dragonborn investigates a series of gruesome murders. A serial killer known as the Butcher stalks the streets at night, leaving corpses behind in alleys and homes. What makes this chilling storyline so effective is that it feels entirely plausible within Windhelm's fractured atmosphere. This is not a city where neighbours trust one another, or where community binds people together like in Whiterun. It is a city of suspicion, where mistrust and secrecy fester. The murderers become a symbol of Windhelm's deepest sickness. Beneath its proud history and political struggles, it is a city that cannot protect its own people, fractured even in its ability to maintain safety and order. Windhelm's very architecture reflects its fractured nature. The city is a labyrinth of narrow, icy streets divided into distinct quarters. Its ancient stone walls feel less like protection and more like prison walls, cutting off sections of the city from one another. Snow gathers in piles, unshoveled and uncaring, as though the city itself has given up on warmth. Where Whiterun feels open and communal, Windhelm feels claustrophobic and divided. The Grey Quarter is cramped and neglected. The wealthy districts near the Palace of the King stand in stark contrast, spacious and well kept. Even the marketplace feels segmented, a small island of life in an otherwise cold and divided city. Windhelm's design is not welcoming. It is oppressive. It divides its people not only socially, but physically, embedding fracture into its very stones. For the Dragonborn, Windhelm becomes a city of choices. You may side with Ulfric and embrace the Stormcloak Rebellion, lending legitimacy to his fractured vision of Skyrim. Or you may side with the Empire, viewing Windhelm as a bastion of division that must be broken. You may solve the Butcher murders, restoring some sense of order. You may even engage with people of the Grey Quarter, though you cannot heal their plight. Yet no matter what you do, Windhelm never truly changes. Its fractures remain. Even small, they're still there. And its people remain divided. Its architecture remains oppressive. Even in a game defined by the player's power to change the world, Windhelm resists healing. This permanence only deepens its sense of fracture, a city that cannot or will not be made whole. To understand Windhelm's uniqueness, it helps to compare it with Skyrim's other cities. Whiterun is divided politically, but it remains open, central, and welcoming to all. Riften is corrupted by crime, but its divisions are economic rather than racial. Markarth is fractured by forsworn conflict, but its Dwemer architecture unites the city in its strangeness. And Solitude thrives as the imperial capital, relatively stable despite its politics. Windhelm stands apart because its fractures are total. It is divided by history, by politics, by race, by fear, and by architecture. No other city in Skyrim contains so many layers of division, each compounding the others into a whole defined by brokenness. Maybe what makes Windhelm's fractures most powerful is the atmosphere they create for the player. The city feels cold in more ways than one. Snow drifts endlessly through the air, while the stone walls trap chill in every corner. NPCs are curt, suspicious, or openly hostile. The Grey Quarter oozes misery, while the palace looms as a symbol of power and oppression. Windhelm does not feel like a city of life, but a city of tension. You can sense the fractures even without quests or dialogue. They hang in the air, woven into the sound of the wind and the crunch of boots on the frozen cobblestone. For many players, Windhelm becomes the most uncomfortable city in Skyrim, a place visited for necessity, but rarely lingered in. Windhelm's fractures are not just a reflection of the present, but of Skyrim's broader history. The city embodies the Nord's struggle to hold onto the tradition in the face of change. It embodies the tension between native and outsider, old and new, unity and independence. It is a city where the weight of history bears down on the present, creating cracks that spread outward through every aspect of life. In this way, Windhelm is not just a city fractured, it is a symbol of Skyrim itself. The game's central themes of division, war and identity are all embodied within these walls. To walk through Windhelm is to experience the heart of Skyrim's conflict as well. In the end, Windhelm is not a city to be healed. Its fractures run too deep, embedded in history, culture, and stone. It is a city of tension and division where mistrust festers and unity seems impossible. But perhaps this is what makes it so memorable. Windhelm does not offer comfort or cohesion. It offers the raw, fractured reality of a land at war with itself. It is not a city to love, but a city to remember, for it embodies the broken heart of Skyrim. And that is why Windhelm will forever stand as the most fractured town in all of Skyrim. Windhelm is one of Skyrim's oldest and most imposing cities, a fortress of stone and snow, ruled by Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak and steeped in the tension of the Civil War. But beneath its political strife lies another kind of darkness, one that has nothing to do with armies or kings. Walk through the Grey Quarter, past the frostbitten alleys and suspicious guards, and you may hear it, the whisper of the people. He's performing the Black Sacrament, they say. That Arantino boy, he's trying to summon the Dark Brotherhood. At the heart of this rumour sits a small, unassuming house. Its shutters are closed, its doors locked, its windows unlit. Inside, the air is thick with dread. A single child kneels before a bloody altar, chanting the words of murder. This is the Arantino residence, the most sinister place in all of Skyrim. Not because of what he has done there, but because of what it represents. Grief, fear, innocence corrupted, and the echo of one of Tamriel's darkest traditions. To understand more about the Arantino residence, one must first understand Windhelm. Windhelm is not merely a city, it is a statement. It is Skyrim's oldest capital, founded by Ysgramor himself. and every stone of it seems to remember its violence. Its people are proud, stubborn, and divided. The Nords dominate the upper quarter, whilst the Dark Elves are confined to the grey quarter, forced to endure cold, prejudice, and colder winters. Amid this political and racial tension, Windhelm breeds silence. Its streets are lined with suspicion, its alleys with whispers. The people gossip about war, murder, and the mysterious disappearances that seem to haunt the province. The Aretino residence stands in this city like a festering wound, an abandoned home turned shrine to death. In a city built on old blood, this small house feels like a beating heart of its cruelty. Inside the residence lives a boy, Aventus Aretino. Orphaned after the death of his mother, he was sent to the Honor Hall orphanage in Riften, where he suffered under the cruel care of Grelod the Kind, a name soaked in irony. Her abuse and neglect left deep scars on the children, but none more than Aventus. When he escaped, he returned to Windhelm, his home, determined to do what no child should ever consider, to summon the assassins of the Dark Brotherhood. The Black Sacrament requires a ritual, a human heart, nightshade, candles, and a skull. The supplicant must kneel before these tokens and whisper the name of their intended victim, begging the Night Mother to send her children to kill. And so Aventus, a child barely 10 years old, performed the ritual of murder in his family's home, alone. The act is horrifying not because of blood or gore, but because of what it says about Skyrim's world. A land so cruel that even a child believes death is the only form of justice. The Black Sacrament is one of the most sinister elements in the Elder Scrolls universe. It's simply not a contract, it's a prayer to death itself. The ritual is ancient, born from the cult of the Night Mother, the spectral matron of the Dark Brotherhood. To perform it is to invite evil into one's home willingly, to ask for murder as though it were mercy. In Aventus's case, it's both. His words, sweet mother, send your child into me," are chilling not because they came from a killer, but because they come from a child. The innocence of the voice collides with the horror of the act. The Aretino residence then is not merely sinister because of what happens there, it's sinister because of what it means. That Skyrim is a world where a grieving boy can speak to gods of death and the gods will answer. Stepping into the Aretino residence is one of Skyrim's most atmospheric experiences. The moment you cross the threshold, you feel it. The air grows heavy and the silence becomes oppressive. Dust coats the furniture. Cobwebs hang from the corners. The place feels like time has stopped. And then you see the ritual, the skull, the candles, the blood. Aventus kneels before it, repeating the Black Sacrament over and over, his voice trembling yet determined. No music plays, no wind howls, just the voice of a child praying for a death. In that moment, the player is not facing a dragon or a dragger. They are facing something far worse, the collapse of innocence. That is what makes the Aretino residence the most sinister place in Skyrim. It feels real, and it feels human. Understanding why Aventus turned to the Black Sacrament, one must also understand his target, Grelod the Kind. At the Honor Hall orphanage, Grelod runs her institution with cruelty, masked as discipline. The children cower before her. She belittles them, starves them, and crushes their spirits. Her abuse is not physical alone, it is emotional and psychological. And yet, in the eyes of Skyrim's law, she has done nothing wrong. No guards come to investigate, no Jarl intervenes. Aventus's plea, then, is not just for vengeance, it's for justice in a world where this has failed. The Aretino residence becomes a courtroom of one, where a child becomes both judge and supplicant, begging a dark god to right the wrongs that mortal law ignores. It's easy to condemn Aventus's actions, but in the world of Skyrim, his choice makes sense. That moral complexity is what makes his home feel so cursed. When the Dragonborn enters the Artino residence, they become part of this story. Aventus mistakes the player for a member of the Dark Brotherhood, and without hesitation he offers gold and begs for Grelod's death. He is not afraid, he is desperate. The player can agree, leave, or refuse, but the damage is already done. The act of murder has been set in motion. Whether the Dragonborn chose to carry out the contract or not, the Artino residence has already fulfilled its purpose. By entering that house, the player bears witness to the darkest kind of tragedy, a child's faith not in gods of light, but in gods of death. Windhelm's people gossip about the Artino boy, with fear and disgust, calling him cursed, yet none of them helped him. None took him in after his mother died. None spoke out when the orphanage mistreated him. Their fear of the supernatural outweighs their sense of compassion. In this way, Windhelm itself becomes part of the curse. The city allows the conditions that drive Aventus to his ritual. It turns away from suffering and then recoils at the monster it creates. The Artino residence is thus a mirror held up to Windhelm's soul, a reflection of its apathy, prejudice, and decay. At its heart, the story of this residence is about innocence twisted into something unrecognizable. Aventus's ritual isn't performed out of malice, it's performed out of faith. He believes truly and completely that the gods of death can save him where the gods of life cannot. This preservation of faith is what makes this scene so powerful. In Skyrim, the 9 divines are often silent. The Daedric princes are active, manipulative, and cruel. Aventus, in his desperation, chose the only gods who seemed to answer prayers, the wrong ones. And in that moment, his house becomes a chapel, but a chapel to despair. Even after you complete the Dark Brotherhood questline, Windhelm's people still whisper about their boy. The house remains locked, its ritual circle intact, its aura unchanged. Time passes, but the darkness doesn't fade. The candles still burn, the skull still grins, and the silence still waits. In a land filled with dragons, wars, and Daedric horrors, it is remarkable that one of the most terrifying places in Skyrim is just a quiet house in the middle of a city. A house where a boy once prayed for death and was heard. The Artino residence is sinister not because of what you see inside, but because of what it makes you realise. That sometimes in Skyrim, the greatest evil is not in its monsters, but in its silence. In a land of frost, war, and dragons, safety is a rare luxury. Skyrim is a world defined by peril, from bandits lurking along snowy roads to ancient beasts reawakened by prophecy. And yet, high above the northern coast, perched upon a towering arch of stone, stands a city seemingly untouched by these dangers. Solitude, the capital of Harfinger Hold, and the seat of Skyrim's imperial power, is a paradox. It is a fortress and a sanctuary, a beacon of civilization amidst wilderness and rebellion. While other settlements crumble, burn, or bleed under the chaos of the Civil War, Solitude endures. But what makes Solitude safe? Is it geography, its military strength, or something more subtle? A kind of political insulation that shields it from the chaos below. In a province where safety is as fleeting as illusion, Solitude stands as the safest town in all of Skyrim. And yet, like all things in Skyrim, safety comes with a cost. Solitude's very geography declares its strength. The city rests on a natural stone arch that extends over the Sea of Ghosts, a defensive marvel no invader could hope to breach easily. Its walls are high, its gates are guarded, and its cliffs fall steeply into icy waters below. To reach Solitude, one must climb the winding road from Dragon Bridge, passing through the forests and valleys of Harfinger, before finally reaching the Great Stone Bridge that leads to the capital's gates. That journey alone dissuades all but the most determined attackers. Unlike Whiterun, open and central, or Riften, tangled in corruption and rot, Solitude is detached. physically and politically. Its elevated position gives it both a literal and symbolic sense of superiority. It looks down upon the rest of Skyrim, not just in geography, but in temperament. It is a city built not for survival, but for rule. While other cities in Skyrim have suffered rebellion, fire, and dragon attacks, Solitude remains untouched. Dragons may roam near its outskirts, but they rarely breach its defences. Bandits dare not to approach. Even the war between the Stormcloaks and the Empire struggles to reach it. That security stems from the Imperial Legion's presence within the castle. Solitude is not merely a city, it is a fortress. The Legion trains here, eats here, and plans its campaigns from its stone halls. Its soldiers patrol the streets, and the sight of their red and gold armour is as common as the sound of the ocean wind. Safety in Solitude is enforced by the Empire's authority. General Tullius's presence alone makes it a stronghold of order, and where law is backed by legions, chaos rarely dares to breathe. While Riften festers with thieves and Windhelm splits under racism and war, Solitude carries on, orderly, elegant, and eerily calm. Its streets are quiet not because its citizens are free, but because they are contained. Safety often walks hand in hand with wealth. The more prosperous a place is, the more resources it can devote to security, infrastructure, and control. Solitude is the economic heart of Skyrim's northern coast. Its docks, located below the Arch, are busy with Imperial trade ships and Nordic fishing vessels alike. The East Empire Company maintains its headquarters here, ensuring a constant flow of gold and goods. Merchants, nobles, and courtiers live behind its stone walls, protected by guards whose armour gleams in the torchlight. Its markets are filled with fine wares and foreign luxuries, while beggars and thieves are nearly non-existent. But this safety is not shared equally. The city's wealth is concentrated among its elite, families like the Firebeards and the Blue Palace's courtiers, while the labourers of the docks live quieter, harder lives. Even so, compared to the disease-ridden slums of Riften or the frozen hovels of Dawnstar, even Solitude's poor dwell in relative comfort. For them, the walls are not just protection, they are hope. At the heart of Solitude's peace stands Jarl Elisif the Fair, widow of the High King and the figurehead of imperial authority in Skyrim. Though young and politically inexperienced, Elisif serves as a stabilizing presence. Her court is filled with loyal advisors and imperial allies, ensuring that no dissent growls too loudly within her walls. Her rule represents continuity, the promise that even amid civil war, Solitude remains untouched by the chaos consuming the rest of the province. Her demeanour, gentle and diplomatic, complements the city's atmosphere. Solitude is not a place of rebellion, but of refinements. Its people see themselves as civilized in a land of savagery. Yet Elisif's safety and that of her city depends heavily on imperial protection. Without General Tullius and his soldiers, Solitude's peace might not last. In that sense, its safety is not innate, but borrowed. Still, as long as the imperial banners hang from its towers, Solitude remains the safest place in Skyrim. To understand Solitude's safety, one must compare it to the turmoil elsewhere. Whiterun teeters between neutrality and destruction. Windhelm bleeds from civil unrest. Riften drowns in corruption. Falkreath is haunted by death. Morthal is shrouded in superstition. Even Markarth, fortified and proud, hides a festering conspiracy beneath its stone. Solitude, by contrast, is a city of calm predictability. Its people go about their daily routines. The bards singing in the winking skeever, merchants hugging in the square, guards chatting idly by the gates. It feels static, almost frozen in time. That stillness, however, can still feel unnerving. Skyrim is a land that breathes conflict, yet Solitude seems immune to it. It is as though time itself refuses to move there. Some might call that peace, others might call it stagnation. Geographically, Solitude is one of the most isolated major settlements in Skyrim. Its northern coastal position means it's far away from the heart of the Civil War, the trade routes of the Central Plains, and the chaos of the southern holds. While Whiterun and Windhelm find themselves on the front lines of battle, Solitude's distance keeps it safe. The Sea of Ghosts protect it on one side, mountains on the other. The only approach is by a single defensible road. This isolation makes it both a fortress and a prison. Its people rarely leave, and few outsiders arrive without purpose. To live in solitude is to live apart, to exist in a world that watches the rest of Skyrim burn from a comfortable distance. No city in Skyrim benefits more from Imperial protection than Solitude. The Legion's headquarters in the castle serves as both deterrent and defense. Soldiers march through the streets, maintaining a visible presence, and keeps crime and rebellion at bay. Even the Thieves Guild, who influences nearly every city, has almost no foothold here. Assassins rarely dare to strike within its walls, and the Dark Brotherhood, if they ever target someone in Solitude, do so at great risk. This omnipresent authority creates an environment where order is absolute. The citizens may not all support the Empire, but they understand that Solitude's safety depends on it. It's a city where one can walk unarmed through the night without fear, not because crime doesn't exist, but because it is swiftly crushed. When you stand at the edge of Solitude's Great Arch and look down upon the Sea of Ghosts, the wind carries with it the sound of distant battle. Somewhere out there, dragons roar and civil war rages. But here, in this city of stone and song, the fire of chaos do not reach. Solitude remains calm, aloof, and eternal. It may not be the warmest city, nor the kindest, but it is the safest. And in Skyrim, that is somewhat of a miracle. Solitude's walls stand not just against enemies, but against time itself. It endures not because it is untouched by darkness, but because it has learned to contain it. Skyrim is a world that usually makes sense. You follow a road, you find a ruin, you clear it, and you move on. Everything has a purpose, everything has a direction. But then there are places that don't quite fit, locations that feel disconnected, layouts that loop in ways they shouldn't, stories that start and never fully finish. These aren't the biggest or most dangerous places in the game. They're the ones that leave you standing there thinking, wait, what was this supposed to be? Because not every part of Skyrim is clear. Some places feel unfinished, some feel intentionally vague, and others feel like they're hiding something, but never actually tell you what it is. And those are often the most memorable, because confusion more than anything else sticks with you. There are cities in Skyrim that feel immediately understandable. Whiterun is open and honest. Solitude is political but structured. Windhelm is divided but clear in its tensions. And then there's Markarth, a city that, the longer you spend in it, the less sense it seems to make. Not because it lacks detail, but because it has too much of it, layered in ways that never fully align. Markarth is one of the most confusing places in Skyrim, not due to its layout alone, but because everything about it, its history, its politics, its people, feels like it's operating on multiple contradictory levels at once. At first glance, Markarth is striking, built directly into ancient Dwemer stone. It feels less like a city that was constructed, and more like one that was discovered and then occupied. The clean, geometric architecture of the Dwemer clashes with the rough, human elements layered on top of it. Water flows unnaturally through the city, machinery hums quietly in the background, and there's a constant sense that the place wasn't meant for the people currently living in it. That alone creates a subtle unease. You're not just in a city, you're in something older, something that doesn't quite belong to the present. But the confusion really begins the moment you arrive. Before you even take in your surroundings, you witness a public murder in the marketplace. It's sudden, unavoidable, and immediately followed by a guard handing you a note that pulls you into a conspiracy you don't yet understand. This sets the tone for Markarth perfectly. There's no introduction, no easing in, just an immediate sense that something is wrong beneath the surface. and that you've already been pulled into it whether you like it or not. From there, everything starts to unravel. The city is controlled by the Silverblood family, who present themselves as powerful and respectable, but quickly reveal themselves to be deeply corrupt. They have influence over the guards, control over the mines, and even a presence within the prison system. But their power doesn't feel stable. It feels aggressive, like it's constantly being asserted rather than naturally maintained. You're told they run the city, but the way they operate makes it feel like they're barely holding onto control. At the same time, the Forsworn loom over everything. They're described as savages, rebels, outsiders, a constant threat to the safety of the Reach. But the deeper you dig, the less clear that label becomes. The Forsworn aren't just random attackers. They have history here. They were here before the Nords took Markarth, and depending on who you listen to, their actions start to feel less like mindless violence and more like resistance. And that's where the confusion really sets in, because Markarth doesn't give you a clear side to stand on. The Silverbloods are undeniably corrupt. The Forsworn are undeniably violent. The guards enforce order, but that order feels compromised. Every faction within the city feels flawed, incomplete, or misleading in some way. There's no clean narrative, no obvious truth, just overlapping perspectives that never fully line up. Even the prison, Sidna Mine, reflects this. When you're sent there, often against your will, it becomes clear that the justice system in Markarth is more about control than fairness. Prisoners aren't just serving time, they're being used, exploited, and in some cases silenced. And yet, even within the prison, there are layers of complexity as well. Madanak, the leader of the Forsworn, represents his own version of events, one that directly contradicts what you've been told up to that point. And again, the game doesn't give you a definite answer. It just adds another perspective. This constant shifting of the truth is what makes Markarth so disorientating. You're never entirely sure who's right, who's lying, or who's simply telling a version of events that benefits them. Information feels unreliable. Authority feels questionable. Even your own role in the city becomes unclear as you're pulled between different sides without ever committing to one. Then there's the Dwemer aspect. Unlike other Dwemer ruins, which are typically separate from modern settlements, Markarth is built directly into one. That means the mystery of the Dwemer isn't something you explore in isolation. It's literally woven into everyday life. People live in their structures, use their systems, and walk their halls without fully understanding them. The city exists on top of a civilization that disappeared without explanation. And that unanswered question lingers in everything. Why build a city here? Why rely on structures you don't understand? Why does it all still work? These questions don't have answers, but they add to the overall sense that Markarth is not a place built on stable foundations, physically or narratively. Even the layout of the city contributes to this feeling. It's vertical, uneven, and easy to get lost in. Staircases lead to unexpected places. Paths loop back in on themselves. It doesn't flow like other cities in Skyrim. It feels almost intentionally disorientating, as if the design itself is reinforcing the confusion of everything happening within it. And maybe that's the point. Because Markarth isn't just confusing in one way. It's politically confusing, morally confusing, historically confusing, even spatially confusing. Every layer of the city adds to a larger sense that nothing here is as straightforward as it should be. And in the end, what makes Markarth one of the most confusing places in Skyrim isn't that it lacks clarity, it's that it presents too many conflicting versions of it. It's a city built on someone else's ruins, controlled by people you can't trust, threatened by enemies who might not be entirely wrong, and filled with systems that don't quite function the way they're supposed to. And no matter how long you spend there, it never fully makes sense. Some locations in Skyrim are confusing because of their politics, others because of their history. But Shriekwind Bastion is confusing in a much quieter, more disorientating way. It's the kind of place you can clear in a single visit and still walk away feeling like you missed something important, not because it's especially large or complex, but because it never fully explains what it is, why it exists in its current state, or how all of its pieces are meant to fit together. It sits high in the mountains between Falkreath and the Rift, isolated and easy to overlook, and yet when you actually take the time to explore it, it feels strangely layered, like multiple ideas were placed on top of each other without ever being fully resolved. At its core, Shriekwind Bastion is a Nordic ruin. You see it in the stonework, the structure, the familiar presence of Draga deeper within its halls. That alone should make it straightforward. Nordic ruins tend to follow a pattern. Ancient burial sites filled with undead guardians, built to honour or protect something from the past. But Shriekwind Bastion doesn't fully commit to that identity, because almost immediately, that expectation is interrupted by something else entirely: vampires. Not hidden away as a small intrusion, not tucked into a corner of the ruin, but actively occupying the space, reshaping it into something that feels more like a lair than a tomb. Coffins are scattered throughout, bloodstains replace the usual dust and decay, and the atmosphere shifts from ancient to predatory. It's not just that vampires are present, it's that they've claimed the location in a way that feels complete, as if the ruin has been repurposed entirely. Because Shriekwind Bastion never explains how or why this happened. Was this a strategic location for vampires, chosen for its isolation and elevation? Did they discover the ruin by chance, or were they drawn to something within it? Were the Draga always here, or did their presence come after? The game never tells you. Instead, you're left to navigate a space where two completely different identities coexist without clear connection. On one level, it's a Nordic burial site, tied to Skyrim's ancient past. On another, it's an active vampire stronghold, tied to a much more immediate and personal threat. But the transition between those two states is never shown. It just exists. That lack of transition makes the location feel incomplete in a very specific way. Most places in Skyrim, even the more mysterious ones, give you some kind of narrative thread to follow. A journal, a quest, a piece of dialogue, something that helps you understand what happened. Shriekwind Bastion offers very little of that. There's not really a central story guiding your exploration. No clear event that defines the space. Just fragments of two different ideas layered on top of each other. Even the layout contributes to this feeling. The bastion is split into multiple sections, with separate entrances and pathways that don't always connect in intuitive ways. You can enter from one side and clear a portion of it, only to realise that later there's another section entirely, accessible from a different point on the mountain. It doesn't flow like a single cohesive dungeon. It feels segmented, like pieces of a larger design that was never fully stitched together. And because of that, it's easy to leave thinking you've seen everything, when you really actually haven't. That kind of design creates a subtle but persistent uncertainty. You're never entirely sure if you've fully understood the space, or if there's something you overlooked. And because the game doesn't push you back in, doesn't give you a reason to return, that uncertainty lingers. There's also something strange about the tone of the location. Vampire lairs in Skyrim tend to lean heavily into a specific atmosphere, dark, oppressive, almost theatrical in their presentation. They feel intentional, crafted to reflect the nature of the creatures that inhabit them. Nordic ruins, on the other hand, carry a different kind of weight. Quiet, ancient, rooted in history and ritual. Shriekwind Bastion tries to hold both of these tones at once, and the result is something that never fully settles into either. It's not as grand or ritualistic as other Nordic tombs. It's not as focused or stylized as other vampire dens. It sits somewhere in between, and that in-between space is what makes it feel so off. Even the name Shriekwind Bastion adds to the confusion. It suggests something dramatic, like the very first vampire, whose screams are often heard throughout Skyrim, a stronghold shaped by the environment, defined by the wind and the isolation. And while the location does sit high in the mountains, exposed and distant, that idea is never fully realised in the design or storytelling. The name does imply significance, but the experience doesn't quite deliver on it. And that disconnect sticks with you, because Shriekwind Bastion feels like it should mean more than it does. Like there's a story here that was never fully told, a connection that was never fully explored, a purpose that was never clearly defined. It's not empty, it's actually far from it. There are enemies, loot, environmental details. It functions as a dungeon in every mechanical sense. But narratively, it feels unfinished. Not in a broken way, but in a way that leaves gaps, spaces where something could have been, but isn't. And those gaps are what makes it confusing, because your mind tries to fill them in. You start to create your own explanations. Maybe the vampires discovered the ruin and drove out whatever was there before. Maybe they're using it for something specific, something the game doesn't show. Maybe the separation of its sections is intentional, reflecting different periods of use. But none of that is confirmed. It's all speculation, built on a foundation that never fully supports it. In a game as detailed and interconnected as Skyrim, that stands out. Most locations, even minor ones, feel like they belong to the world in a clear way. They have context, purpose, and a sense of place within the larger narrative. Shriekwind Bastion feels like it exists just outside of that clarity, not disconnected, but not fully integrated either. And that's what makes it one of the most confusing places in the game, not because it's complicated, but because it feels like it's missing something just out of reach, something that would make it all make sense. But it never really quite arrives. There are places in Skyrim that are confusing because of how they are built. And then there are places that are confusing because of what they are. The Soul Cairn falls firmly into that secondary category. It's not just a location you explore, it's a concept you're forced to navigate, a realm that doesn't follow the same rules as the rest of the game, either mechanically or narratively. Introduced in the Dawnguard expansion, the Soul Cairn immediately feels different from anything else in Skyrim. Not just darker or more dangerous, but fundamentally wrong. And the more time you spend there, the less certain you become about how it works, why it exists in the way it does, and what your presence there actually means. On a surface level, the Soul Cairn is a plane of oblivion, a realm controlled by the Ideal Masters, mysterious entities who trade in souls. That explanation gives you a basic framework, something to hold on to. But it doesn't take long for that framework to start breaking down. Because unlike other Daedric realms in Skyrim which tend to reflect the personality or domain of a specific prince, the Soul Cairn feels abstract. There's no clear ruler you interact with, no defined purpose beyond the vague idea of souls being stored and traded. The Ideal Masters exist, but only as distant floating forms, barely present, barely understandable. They don't speak in ways that clarify anything. They don't guide you. They don't even fully acknowledge you. And that distance creates an immediate sense of disorientation. Because you're not just in a foreign place. You're in a system that you don't understand. The environment itself reinforces that feeling. The Soul Cairn is vast, open, and eerily empty. But not in a peaceful way. It's a kind of emptiness that feels intentional, like space has been stretched out beyond what it should be. Structures appear without clear purpose. Pathways lead to nothing. Landmarks exist, but they don't anchor you in any meaningful way. You can see far into the distance, but that visibility doesn't help you orient yourself. If anything, it makes the space feel even more unnatural. It's not designed to be navigated comfortably. It's designed to make you feel lost. And that feeling is only amplified by the inhabitants. The souls trapped within the Cairn are not presented in a consistent or easily understood way. Some appear as wandering figures, repeating fragments of dialogue that hint at regret, confusion, or anger. Others are bound to specific locations, tied to the deals they made in life that they clearly didn't fully understand. Then there are entities like the Keepers and Wraithmen, which seem to enforce some kind of order, but without ever explaining what that order is meant to achieve. Nothing about it feels structured. Clearly, there are rules, but you're never fully told what they are. You just experience the consequences of them. Even the central premise of this place, that souls are traded here in exchange for power, raises more questions than it answers. Who is making these deals? How are they enforced? Why do the ideal masters want these souls in the first place? The game gives you pieces of this information, but never enough to form a complete picture. It's implied that necromancers and other magic users can bargain with the ideal masters, offering souls in exchange for knowledge or power. But the mechanics of that exchange are left intentionally vague. And that vagueness creates a kind of narrative instability, because you're constantly trying to understand something that resists being understood. Serana's presence in the Soul Khan adds another layer to this confusion. As someone directly tied to the events that allow you to enter the realm, she provides context, but even her understanding is limited as well. She knows of the Soul Khan, but not everything about it. Her familiarity doesn't translate into clarity. Instead, it reinforces the idea that this is a place beyond even the knowledge of those who have studied it. Then there's Valerica, Serana's mother, who has chosen to remain in the Soul Khan rather than return to the world of the living. Her decision makes sense on a surface level. She's hiding from Harkon. But the fact that the Soul Khan is considered a viable refuge raises even more questions. Why is this place, which is clearly hostile and unstable, safer than the world outside? What does that say about both the Khan and the threats beyond it? It blurs the line between prison and sanctuary. And that's a recurring theme throughout the entire experience, because the Soul Khan is never clearly defined as one or the other. It traps souls, but it also houses them. It punishes, but it also preserves. It feels like a place of torment, but not in a way that's fully intentional or directed. It's not hell, at least not in the traditional sense. There's no judgment, no moral framework guiding who ends up there. Souls are collected, not condemned. And that distinction makes the entire realm feel colder, more mechanical. Even the quest structure within the Soul Khan contributes to this sense of confusion. Objectives are often vague, spread out across a massive disorientating landscape. You're asked to find specific figures, objects, or locations, but the process of doing so rarely feels guided. You wander, you search, you piece things together as you go. And while that can create a strong sense of immersion, it also reinforces the idea that you're operating without a full understanding of the space you're in. You're not mastering the Soul Khan, you're surviving it. And maybe that's the point, because the Soul Khan isn't meant to be fully understood. It's meant to feel alien, disconnected, like a system that exists entirely outside of human logic. In a game where most mysteries can eventually be unraveled, where most locations can be understood through exploration and context, the Soul Khan stands apart. It resists that process. It gives you just enough information to function, but never enough to feel comfortable. And when you finally leave, there's a lingering sense that you didn't really solve anything. You just got out, which makes it one of the most confusing places in all of Skyrim. Not because it's poorly explained, but because it's intentionally, fundamentally unknowable. Skyrim is usually a world that rewards understanding. You explore, you piece things together, and eventually it all makes sense. But places like Markarth, Shriekwind Bastion, and the Soul Khan don't really follow that rule. They give you information, just not enough. They show you structure, but not intention. They tell stories that never fully connect. And that's what makes them stick, because you don't leave these places feeling satisfied. You leave them thinking about what you missed, what didn't quite add up, what might be hiding just beneath the surface. In a game full of clear paths and defined outcomes, These are the places that feel unfinished in the best way. Not broken, just unresolved. And sometimes that lingering confusion is far more memorable than any clear answer could ever be.